Hello, team players, and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about those New York Giants. Victor, lead it off, man, because I don't think I can give justice to what you guys went through in terms of the end of Eli, maybe even during Eli, to get to this point now with Daboll first year making the playoffs and winning a road playoff game.
Well, really, the last, I don't know, 11, 12 years, ever since we beat the Patriots 2011, it's been a really tough time because we only made the playoffs one time after that. And the last 5 years before this season, we were tied, I believe, with the Jets for the worst record in the NFL. So it's been a very trying time. We've been losing a lot of games, and we don't have a lot of talent, and we signed a bunch of free agents, but most of them didn't do anything. So, hasn't been a really good time up until this year. And this year we, with a limited amount of talent but very good coaching and a well managed team, we made the playoffs and even won a playoff game. So we're very happy. We're trending in the right direction, and we're optimistic about the future.
So going through there, I mean, obviously, to me, there were two main differences that happened from the Giants of this year versus the Giants of year prior. The first being Saquon looked healthy and great, and the second being that Daniel Jones didn't turn the ball over. So as I look at the Giants, those two individuals are kind of like the hot button issues of the offseason. So I wanted to start off with them there, starting with Saquon.
No, absolutely. And as Giant fans know, he was the number two pick in 2018. And it was a very controversial pick because everyone in New York wanted a quarterback because Eli was 37 years old. So, as talented as Saquon is, a lot of people wanted a quarterback, and there were like I think six quarterbacks chosen, including Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, who Giant fans would love to have right now. But Saquon, his first year, did really well, and he had an up and down second year because he had an ankle sprain, and then he tore his ACL, so he was out the rest of the next year. But he came back the following year. But I think sometimes it's with an ACL, it takes you maybe a couple years to really get back into the full grind of running. And he did not have a good year running. And I think because he was still coming back from the ACL, even though he was like healthy, but he really wasn't fully healthy. This year he had a very good year, especially the first half he carried the team. And so he's a guy. He's not just a great runner, but he's also a great receiver. So he's by far the best offensive player because he can both run and catch, and he's just such a dangerous dual threat. And I mean, he can stay healthy. Yeah, just watch out for this guy because he's definitely one of the better backs in the NFL when he's healthy, no question.
Yeah, Victor, I kind of want to build on that with you. So there's been some chatter around on Twitter, on Instagram, a lot of social media outlets that are saying that Saquon might be moving from the Giants. They might not be signing him. Your opinion as a fan, how critical and how important is Saquon to this team? And is there anybody else on the roster right now that you would say, well, we've got to keep that guy for a long time?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Probably on offense, he's probably really the top offensive player, and we'll get to Daniel Jones in a second.
Mhm.
And I think the Giants will keep Saquon because there's a lot of chat about what they're going to do with him and with Daniel Jones. Like, are they going to franchise one or the other? And if they franchise one but not the other, will they do what's called a transition tag? Whereas if another franchise tries to sign him, they can match, and if they don't match, they'll get two first-round picks for them. So there's a lot of discussion. I think March 7th is the deadline for the franchise tag. I think Saquon wanted to get like when McCaffrey got about 16 million a year, but I think the chatter is that he realized that he probably won't because he's had those injury years. So even though he's great, he may take like say 14 million a year. I think in the end, the Giants and Saquon will find a way to make a deal because I don't think the Giants will let him go. At worst, they will franchise him. I think they'll definitely keep him. And with Daniel Jones, which you talked about a second, if they don't franchise him, they'll probably do the transition set. I don't think either one goes because they have a pretty good backup with Tyrod Taylor, but I think they want to keep Jones. But there's going to be there's a big issue about how much money he wants right now because he's really shooting for the moon.
Jones is.
Jones is. Yeah, there was over the weekend over here in New York. They were talking about because he switched agents last week. So
Yeah.
and he left CAA and he there's rumor. It's not confirmed, but there's some outlets here saying he might want as much as 45 million because he was saying I'll be in
That's
the
what I
top
heard.
10 right now. But in a couple of years, there's going to be about 6 or 7 other quarterbacks that are going to pass me in that terms of money. So I think he wants to be in the top 10 right now because he knows in a couple of years there'll be a bunch of quarterbacks that'll be, passing because we know quarterbacks are making so much money. It's the most important position in football. So I think he wants that money. But I don't think the Giants will give him 45 million. There's no way he gets that.
Do you think he's worth it?
No, I don't. I think
Mhm.
he's an improved quarterback, but there's still a lot about him we don't know, and that's why the Giants did not. That's why they did not pick up his options. His options, I think, 21, 22 million. And when the Giants did not pick up his option, it was not controversial over here. No one was surprised. I know he wasn't happy, but you know what? Looking back, he should be happy because he's going to probably, he'll at worst he'll get the franchise tag, which is like 32 million. So he's actually going to get a $10 million raise at least. So I don't think he leaves, but I can understand at the time because he himself didn't know what he was going to do. And as you mentioned, Joe, he had a lot of problems, especially in the early years. He fumbled so much, he turned the ball over a lot, and he got better at that. But he also, during the last couple of years before this year, he was also being a little less aggressive. So I think because they were doing that to cut down on his turnovers, and that's why when Daboll came in this year, he was very careful the first few games because I think he wanted to help his confidence. He did a lot of great work with Josh Allen. Obviously, Daniel Jones is not as good as Josh Allen, but he knows Daniel Jones is not as bad as he's seemed the last couple of years. So I think during the last few games of the year, he let him take more chances with the throwing and the run. And Jones did a great job rushing. He rose for a whole bunch of yards, a number of touchdowns. He did a really good job rushing. So I think he's valuable in that aspect because he's shown over the last couple of years he has a lot of good mobility. So that's why I think he and the Giants will find a way to make a deal. Because here's the thing: if the Giants do a transition tag on him, I don't think any team's going to give up 2 first-round picks for him. I don't.
Yeah, that part's fair. In his defense, though, or I guess looking at just the capitalism of the league and where it's at right now, there's between 7 and 11 teams that should or at least could be quarterback hunting right now. The entire NFC South, for instance, he is an upgrade over. You can just rattle off the rest of the teams. Houston's one of them. The Jets are one of them. That he's all an improvement over. So he should go and ask for this kind of crazy money because, there's this many buyers. Someone's going to cash the check, whether it's before free agency starts or after. You should go for it. That's just proof he's one of the best 32. He's not top 10, but he's one of the best 32, and therefore he'll have a job.
That's such a weird statement to make, though, Joe. He's one of the best 32. I mean,
He is.
like he is. He is. I would believe that he's in the top 21 at the very least, just based off of his rushing ability. Like Victor said, and like we've talked about before on the show, is that was the one characteristic of Daniel Jones that you could rely on consistently, was that he would move the ball downfield with his legs, and the rushing attack of the Giants was top notch. There's no questions asked around that. But the question is, Victor, is that when we look at the Giants heading into next year and reflecting on this year, is that when it comes to improvements to make, it seems like Daniel Jones has a lot to do through the air. But do you feel the Giants would be better off going in a different direction at quarterback, as a fan at least?
If you say let's get Patrick Mahomes and say I go for Mahomes, but we're not going to get Mahomes, for example. We're not going to get Hurts or those guys. But I think if you get the right players, I think you can win a Super Bowl with Daniel Jones. Obviously, he needs to improve on his passing, but his rushing ability is very good. He's cut down on the turnovers. And one thing he did this year, which was another big question mark, is he stayed healthy. He's had a lot of injury problems in the past. And I think part of it is also the offensive line. The offensive line got a little bit better this year. It still needs room for improvement because you go where your offensive line goes. That goes for the quarterback and for the running back. So I think they're definitely improving with the offensive line, but they need to improve on that as well. I think in the end, Jones will probably get at least 32 million, maybe 35. He's going to ask for 45 million because, look, in negotiations, you ask for more than you're going to get. So he knows the Giants will not give him that much, but maybe he'll get somewhere in the thirds. He gets, in my opinion, somewhere between 30 and 35 million. I think he gets at least the franchise tag 32 million. If they can't come up with an agreement, he'll get 32. He may get as much as 35 because, like you said, a lot of teams and here in New York, everyone knows that the Jets need a quarterback because there's a lot of question about Zach Wilson. No one knows if he's going to do anything or not. And they're looking at Carr and Garoppolo and all these other guys. So that's the big knock on the Jets because their GM had a great draft this past year, but the draft before this, and no one knows what's going to happen with Wilson. So yeah, you're as good as your quarterback. So I think the Giants are pretty happy with the job Daniel Jones did this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. So we look at the start of your season. You start 6-1. From that point on, it wasn't smooth sailing. I mean, it was a little up and downs. I mean, obviously it ends with the great High Point win in Minnesota, but what was it like experiencing that from really the third week of October on, starting 6-1, entering week 8, and then in week 8 it kind of started chucking away there, go to 6-2, and then like I said, you made the playoffs to the point where you were comfortably able to bench everyone the last week of the year. So, but it doesn't change the fact that you finished the year 4-9 basically.
Yeah,
we 4-7.
Yeah, because we finished 9-7-1, so we finished 3-6-1. 3-6-1. Yeah. So, and look, last year we won 4 games. So at the beginning of the year, yes, any Giants fan, if you told them the Giants would finish 9-7-1, every Giant fan would be like, all right, I'm signing up for that. But a lot of Giants fans, when they were 6-1, saying, wow, can we win the Super Bowl? I'm like, well, this is where, we still have a lot of holes. I mean, a lot of those wins in the beginning were a lot of close wins. There were several come from behind wins. We went in the second half. We were trailing in the first half. We came back, and they were very close wins. And so a number of those games could have gone either way. We could have easily been 4-3, 3-4. So, but that was good coaching on Daboll's part. So, give him credit for that. And then we lost some games in the second half that we probably, won in the first half. We lost that game against Seattle because that was a game that was close. And then, Geno Smith, who really wanted to stick it to the Giants because they let him go a few years ago. And then again, he beat the Jets as well. So we 3-6-1 wasn't good, but they also had a bunch of injuries as well. So there was a bunch of factors, but the thing to keep in mind is we're not one of the top 5 teams talent-wise in the NFL. There's no question. We still have room to grow. So yeah, so it was tough watching a 3-6-1 finish. Yes, but when I just kept in mind, we won 4 games last year. We won 9 this year. So overall, I'm very happy. So that's the perspective I took. So yeah, as a fan, you never want to see your team lose, but we also understand, that, we don't have a lot of receivers. And one of our, rookie receivers, Wan'Dale Robinson, he tore his ACL in the middle of the year. He looked like a guy was going to be pretty good. And we all know Kenny Galladay was a bust. He had 1 touchdown in 2 years. He'll probably be released before June 1st. And then we had Sterling Shepard, also got injured. He was out. So, and again, but the other guys did okay. But we don't have that breakaway receiver. So we got Saquon and Barkley, but we need to get some more receivers. So I'll be honest with you, the writers here when they traded Kadarius Toney, they were all like, "Oh wow, they got a 3rd round pick and a 6th round pick for him." The guy was a 1st round pick. He's got talent. I know he had a bit of an attitude issue, but I think because we don't have receivers right now, I think we should have given him 1 more year before we let him go. So I don't know what's going to happen in the long run, but I would have preferred that they give him 1 more year, see if they could work things out with him. Then if not, maybe trade him because he's still young and I think he was the 11th pick in the draft. So I'm not one of the Giants fans who was happy to see him trade just because we don't have much in terms of receivers. So I would have preferred just to wait 1 more year. I know he had that nice run back in the Super Bowl, but even before that, I'm just saying, give him 1 more year because we don't have the tools for wide receivers.
Victor, I have a question, Joe, for Victor here. So when we talk about wide receivers, do you think while you're watching the games on a week-to-week basis, Do you think that the lack of talent at wide receiver is holding Daniel Jones back? Or do you think that potentially it's Daniel Jones's ability that is holding some of these wide receivers back?
I think it's probably more the former. I don't think we have enough talent at wide receiver. So again, we still don't know just how good Daniel Jones really is. I think he's got
Mhm.
talent. I think he showed some, especially toward the second half of the year. He showed a little bit more with the arm. But yeah, he's not going to be confused with Joe Montana, but he can definitely be a winner. I think you put some talent there, he'll do well. Again, like Kenny Galladay did not do well, but you know what? They had this guy Isaiah Hodgins who was like, was nobody, but he did a pretty decent season with the Giants, so he did pretty well with him. So that's why I say it's probably more the receivers than it is Daniel Jones. So I think
So
he does have some talent.
Mhm.
on that line of Hodgins and James, the way that they finish out the year, starting with the precedent that we don't believe they're talented enough, they did produce though
Yeah.
at the end of the year. So is this potentially a situation where they essentially bought themselves another year that the Giants won't look at that as being a priority draft slot and giving Hodgins the chance, or is it going to be something where it's we appreciate what you did in the second half of the season, but we're getting a first round here regardless of what you did. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I definitely think those two guys will be back next year. Hodges, they signed to a 1 year deal already, so they'll be back. But I agree, if they find a good receiver in the draft, they're definitely going to look to draft because I think they know they can get better at that. I mean, Shepard is always injured. He probably is not going to come back. He's a guy everyone loves. He's a good team player, but he's had a lot of big injury history. We don't know if he'll be back, so I think they'll definitely keep looking for that. Again, they have a lot of holes. They're going to look for another offensive lineman because you got to protect the quarterback and the running back. They need another rusher. They need someone to help stop the run. They're thin at the corner, so there's definitely a lot. But sticking getting back to the offense, yeah, I think they'll if there's a good receiver available when they're picking, I think they'll definitely take a look at it. A receiver and lineman, I think they're two biggest offensive needs right now.
And that's fair. So this just popped in my head here, and this might be crazy talk. You seem to be very dialed in with the numbers there. If they franchise or transition tag Jones, where he's potentially a free agent, if someone comes and gets him, say they do that, but they don't reach a long term deal. They get the one off possibility that just says free agency came and went. No one signed you, Daniel. We got you for the 1 year. Is there a realistic possibility the Giants are secretly in the quarterback draft market and they just let Daniel Jones be here for 1 year and then say thank you? Or will they treat Daniel almost like the way where they did with Eli, where basically if you make it through this deal, you'll retire a Giant?
That's a good question because I'm hearing from all different angles. I think there's some rumors that they might try to give him a 2 year deal, maybe franchise in 2 years, or get a 2 year deal saying, let's see how you do the next couple of years. And then if you do well, we'll give you a nice long term deal, give you a lot of money. Because I think some people in the organization might be wondering, was this just a one off year? No one really knows. I personally think he's always had some talent. So I think really showed what he can do, and I think if you put enough people in that offensive line, he'll continue to improve. So, but I also think that if they can't come up with a deal that's satisfactory to them, that they can't really sign him, and they keep him for 1 or 2 years, they might start looking elsewhere if they can't sign. But I think their preference is to keep Daniel Jones. Again, you always have to keep in mind he's not their guy. He was drafted by the previous administration, so that's something you always have to keep in mind when a new regime comes in. They always think, okay, but he's not my guy, and then bring him in, and he's not Joe Montana, he's not Mahomes, he's not one of Josh Allen, he's not one of these top three, top quarterbacks in the NFL. So they may not be as they may not be as loyal to him as if someone who's really in the top three. But I do think they would prefer to keep him. But you also have to keep in mind in football you have that hard salary cap, so it may not be always easy to keep him. They want the money. Well, this past year they had to release James Bradbury. He was the best player in the secondary, but he was making $12 million a year, and they were over the cap. They tried trading him. No one wanted him because they knew they were going to release him. So they waited till they released him. So That's the thing. You got to sign him. You got to sign Barkley. That's not going to be cheap. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, and so the one thing that I always had, and this is an outside perception looking at the Giants here, it always felt to me that the Giants had a plan, just sometimes it didn't work. We knew we needed a receiver. We just picked the wrong one in free agency, and Galladay cost us. It never felt like the Jets were like that. They were always just rolling the dice, crapping out, trying again, crapping out, and just going through each new regime, drafting a new quarterback. So I say that because it feels that your ownership status is so much more secure. And when Mara came out and said we did almost everything possible to ruin this guy, and to see him have one of the best quarterback seasons this year, I find is remarkably encouraging from off the field type language. But when I watch the tape, he leaves a lot to be desired in my mind. And part of the reason I believe he runs so much is because he doesn't progress his reads well enough. And I know that there were a couple of different games that I observed where he did not complete any routes that were running away from him. He's very good at catching curls, comebacks, and lateral across the line of scrimmage. But in terms of connecting and completing the deep passes, it seemed to be lacking in the offense. And the one thing that Daboll excelled at in Buffalo was pushing the field and going downfield. Obviously, Josh Allen is a different arm caliber than Jones, but knowing that that's what Daboll did successfully, has there been talk of him trying to bring that to the offense here at New York, or is he strictly just going with this is the ingredients, I'll build a good dessert?
Yeah, yeah. Well, obviously, when Daboll came in, one of the reasons they brought him in was because of the great work he did with Josh Allen, and obviously he realizes that Jones is not as talented as Allen is, and that's why in the beginning he was very, very conservative, because he realizes that there were a lot of questions, and I think he wanted to focus more with Saquon Barkley early on. I think he started taking more chances during the last 4 or 5 games and in the playoffs. And I think and I agree, he doesn't have the arm like Allen does, but I think he's going to try to have him and throw some more. But I think also there's the concern he doesn't have the receivers that a good team really has. So I think it's a combination of those two things. Yeah, I agree. He probably could do some reads better. So I think a lot of what you're saying, there's a lot of truth to that. But you work with your strengths, and I think right now one of the strengths is maybe when he can't find a read, he can run the ball and get that first down. And the thing is, he did a really good job this year of not getting hurt, because he's been injury prone throughout this year. And I think the smart thing the Giants did was they got that guy Taylor to back him up, who's a veteran quarterback. So in case, because in the past they've had a bunch of scrubs as quarterbacks. So once he went down, like the year before when Daniel Jones went down, I think the last 6-7 games he missed. They lost all of those games because the guy behind him just couldn't do it. So and again, but at the same time, you want to get a good backup quarterback, but they also cost money. Again, that's why that salary cap situation is so tricky. It's a lot of times you have to let go of players that you don't want to, and and right now that's something Shane has to think about, and especially this is his first full year as a GM. But I think he'll figure something out.
Yeah, Victor, question here particularly about the wide receivers. It's something that I've been wondering this year, because towards the end of the season, especially when we were making our DFS lineups, I was all in on the Daniel Jones train, particularly for his running abilities in fantasy football. But one of the things that Joe and I were kind of alluding to earlier is the catch on of James and Hodgins towards the latter half of the season. You've said a couple of times that these wide receivers aren't particularly good. So you've watched most likely all of the games this year. What have you seen this year that is particularly lacking in this wide receiver core? Is it speed? Is it hands? Is it route running? What have you seen that makes you say, like, these guys just aren't it?
Yeah, I don't think they really have a breakaway runner, but I will say I think everyone was happy with the job Hodgins done, and he made turn out to be a very good receiver down the road. But no, he came out of nowhere, so he really surprised us in the second half of the year, and James too. But yeah, I don't think I don't think most defenses are really scared by the Giants receivers. I don't think they're going to run past you. You're going to throw a 65-yard bomb for a touchdown. Robinson's a little guy. That's the only concern about him. He was a rookie, got getting towards ACL. He looks like he has some pretty decent speed. But again, yeah, you want a receiver who's a little bit bigger. So I don't know if he's the guy who could be a breakaway too, but he might be a good complement into that core. I think he definitely showed something before he got hurt. So yeah, definitely, probably running routes and just having that breakaway speed and having better hands. But I think they're okay with the hands. But I think the biggest issue is like you really have that breakaway guy. You don't have like some guy's gonna be like a Jerry Rice, for example, just to be that game changer for you. I don't see that in any of those receivers. But I definitely think with James and Hodges, if they keep it up, they could be good complementary receivers. I don't think either one will be ideally a number one receiver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and on that same note, we know that we've been talking about the salary cap. We've been talking about budget this whole time, keeping that in mind. Now, I'm kind of in the vein of the Carolina Panthers in this regard, Victor, is that Christian McCaffrey, they tried their best to build around Christian McCaffrey, and they tried their best to build around his contract. And Christian McCaffrey is, a supreme talent in the NFL with injury problems, similar to Saquon Barkley. I feel like both of those guys are have game breaking ability that is kind of like that once in a lifetime kind of skill set for running backs. And so when we look at the Carolina Panthers, and they moved on from them, and they're deciding now to build around something else. I know you've said before that the Giants are better off with Saquon Barkley, but when we think about also saying that this is a quarterback-driven league and no longer a running back-driven league, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, would you want this team to change from because we noticed all year that the offensive line is really skilled at run blocking, kind of middle of the road in pass blocking. Would you want them to make that transition to being more through the air to make defenses scared and then take an average running back? Or do you prefer this okay, we're going to run, and then maybe we'll beat you? As a fan, what do you prefer to watch, and what do you hope for the Giants?
Yeah. One of the reasons I like Saquon is because he's also a good receiver. But I agree. I think this is a quarterback-driven league. And the view, and one of the reasons why most New York fans, a lot of them were not happy when he was chosen second was because we wanted a quarterback. Eli was 37. There were a whole bunch of quarterbacks. And if Eli was 27, I don't think they would have minded as much, but he was 37. And guess what? The next year they did take a quarterback. So Saquon is like, he just finished his fifth year. He's, again, I find running backs, as good as he is, running backs are much more replaceable than quarterbacks. That's why usually a really good quarterback, they never let him become a free agent. He only leaves the team if he's really good, if he gets traded. They're not going to, 26, Mahomes will never be let go. Hurts will never be let go. Because they're just really, because everyone knows it's the most valuable position in football. And the view, I think, over the last 5-6 years is that running backs don't last this long. You don't see too many 35-year-old running backs running for 1,500 yards. It just doesn't happen because they wear down, they break down. Quarterbacks tend to last longer. You'll see guys. Tom Brady went to his mid-40s before he retired, and Aaron Rodgers, 39 right now. And you'll see quarterbacks lasting till 39, 40. You're not going to see that with running backs, and quarterbacks with serious injuries, they tend to come back better, at least more quickly than a running back. Running back, 1 or 2, especially if he gets a second ACL injury, he's usually done. So I like Saquon Barkley, but I think the way the Giants look at it is I think their bigger priority right now would be Daniel Jones over Saquon Barkley. As good a receiver as he is, he's a dual threat. But I think the Giants, Because the Giants know you can get a good running back in the second round. Yeah, and everyone talks about Tom Brady was a 6th-round pick and Joe Montana was a 3rd-round pick, but generally you don't find a really good quarterbacks in the 5th round. They're usually always in the 1st round, sometimes in the 2nd round. Those guys are anomalies. So you could get a good, sometimes even in the 3rd round you can get a good running back. So as I like Saquon, but he's definitely. I think the view is running. You can get running backs are generally replaceable nowadays. I think we would prefer have more of a passing attack. I think that's the way the NFL's been going the last few years, like you said.
And to switch to another one of your weapons that seemed like they turned on this year, well, he was a rookie, so he had nowhere else to turn on but up, was Bellinger. When he was out there, he seemed to be making a difference. And even though his role in general was about 5 targets, 50 yards, sometimes a touchdown, sometimes not, you could tell when he was on the field compared to when he was injured. I can just tell that from just watching the coaches tape. So how is he received by the fans, and what is the take on your new rookie tight end?
I think he was a pleasant surprise. So again, I don't think a whole lot was expected from him, and tight end is something we've needed help in for the last several years. So I think they're going to give him a chance to play as much as he can. I definitely hope that they will, and I think hopefully he'll continue to progress. So I think Giant fans were pretty happy with him.
Like I said, I'm happy with it. I think that he was tight end's a very hard position to start as a freshman, or correction, as a rookie.
Oh,
And to
absolutely.
do that is a bright sign.
Yeah, no, I definitely have some good hopes for him, and big guy. I mean, there's one guy in Giants history who's really popular. He retired because of injury issues. His name was Mark Bavaria. He was in the late '80s, early '90s, and there's this one play. He was this big guy. He carried like a whole bunch of 49ers, like 22 yards on this one pass. And that was the year they won their first Super Bowl. And that's something you can just watch on YouTube. It's just that. And since then, we've not had a whole bunch. We had Jeremy Shockey, but he had his issues. So tight end has not been a position where the Giants have had a lot of good stories of the last 25 years. So we're really hopeful Bellinger will continue. Like you said, considering it was his rookie year, so it's his first year, we're very hopeful about him. And, hopefully he'll just stay on and continue to develop.
I'm going to ask you to put your tinfoil hat on for a moment. And the reason I'm asking this is because earlier in the season, we spoke with another Giants fan, and Joe and I regularly question this around the league. But in particular for the New York Giants, it seems like every Giants fan and every media person related to the Giants, there's always if there wasn't injuries. Because every single year, star players for the New York Giants are hurt for significant periods of time. Now, when we were speaking to our last guest about the New York Giants, we spoke a little bit about our thoughts about the strength and conditioning, the coaching staff in particular. And it seems like this guy, the coaches on that staff have been there a significant period of time. Now, as a Giants fan, it's not really, and as a football fan in general, we don't really think about strength and conditioning coaches or health and wellness coaches a lot. But is there something going on in New York that these players can't stay healthy? Is it the conditioning? Is it the way that the field is? Because there's lots of talk, at least in with our we have a buddy who's also a Giants fan, and it seems like every year he's disappointed because one of the big guys on the Giants gets hurt, and you're like, well, there it goes, 4 wins, 5 wins. So what is it in your mind that makes this team? I'm just going to say fragile, even though that might not be the right word.
Well, you do have to ask, what kind of, about the strength and conditioning coaches, because and trust me, they're not the only New York team that has that issue. In baseball, the Yankees have had that same problem the last several years. They brought in new people, and they still had the problem. So you have to wonder. And again, most of the injuries generally happen early on in the seasons, like in preseason, the first 2 or 3 games, because they haven't been playing for a while. So those are the times you have to be very careful. It's one of the reasons why coaches don't give the starters a lot of playing time in the preseason because they know that's rife for injury. So I definitely think you need to take a look at that. That's one thing. And sometimes things happen. I mean, if football's a violent game and so there's always going to be at least 2 or 3 guys that are going to tear their ACL. No matter how hard you can do it, it could be a freak thing.
Mhm.
It's no one even touches them. They just take the wrong turn. They fall down, and sometimes sometimes it just happens. But I do think if you have a good strength and conditioning coach, you might be able to minimize the injury. There's always going to be injuries in football. It's a violent game. You're going to have guys who are going to
Mhm.
be out for the year. But I think it's definitely worth taking a look at. The one thing the Giants have been over the years is I think they're starting to change that they've been way too loyal to the people in the organization. They let coaches stay way too long. They let a lot of people say people in the organization, personnel. I mean, the previous GM that was before Shane, they kept him for 4 years, 2 years too long for most Giants fans. But he was a guy that came up in the Giants and then he went to the Panthers and came back. So they were loyal to him. And I think the Giants have learned that you can't just keep everything inside the organization. You need to go outside, get a fresh perspective. And I think that's one reason why they had a better season here because they brought in 2 guys that from a different team and they gave them a different perspective. They changed a lot. So I think sometimes it can lead to too much groupthink. You need to sometimes go
Mhm.
outside the organization, bring in people, and that would change things around. And maybe getting a new strength and conditioning team might make things better.
Oh, you're preaching to the choir, man. We are the 2 largest fan bases of keeping people on for way too long. Now, granted, when you have put 3 Hall of Fame coaches in line since 1967, it's worth it. But when you're, as you said in the beginning here, when you're rivaling the Jets in terms of winning percentage for half a decade, things need to change a little bit. Um, so, with that being said, we've talked this whole conversation here about offense. Obviously, that's only half of the people on the field here. I do want to talk about the defense with the Giants because it really doesn't get any type of conversation at all. And I think particularly about that game you guys had in London against the Packers, where you were losing pretty bad in the first half. Green Bay had the number; they were moving the ball. I think you guys were down by 10 at halftime. I might be wrong on that. But the second half, basically, Aaron Rodgers did nothing. Just incomplete pass
Hmm.
left and right. And next thing I know, Giants won this game. As you know, all the morning pre games were bringing up, like, oh, Giants won this. Packers blew a 10-point lead. And obviously, the defense is a major component of being a second half team. And I wanted to discuss that part doing the transition to the D.
Yeah, and Giants' history has been the 4 Super Bowls that they won has been primarily because of defense. The 2 they won in the '80s when the Bill Parcells, they had a good running game, so wide receiver, decent quarterback, not a Hall of Fame quarterback. Wilson was good, but not Hall of Fame. A pretty good quarterback, but they had incredible defense and they had a great defensive coordinator in Bill Belichick. And the 2 that they won that they beat the Patriots, they won because of their defense. So that's traditionally the way the Giants have won. Their defense is definitely improved from last year. I think Wink Martindale came in and he definitely helped. I mean, they've struggled with their defensive coordinators the last several years, and they did some of those games that they won. They beat Jacksonville. They stopped them at the 1 yard line at the end of the game. It was a great game. As a Giant fan, I was glad we won, but yeah, there was like that one. Yeah, that's when Jacksonville started turning their season
Mm-hmm.
around. So,
It
but that
is.
was a great defensive stop there at the 1. So, but there are definitely a lot of questions. The Giants still are still toward the back in their defense. They're ranked 20 something, 24th, 25th.
Mm-hmm.
But they need to improve their running game. And again, they're very thin in cornerback. They can use another safety. We've talked about this before. Safety can help stop the run. They need help with linebackers, and they need another pass rusher. I think Kayvon Thibodeaux looks like a guy who's going to be pretty good. Dexter Lawrence played very well. I like him. And unfortunately, Azeez Ojulari was hurt. He is a rookie last year. He led him in sacks with 8, and he had a couple injuries this year. Again, as you talked about the injuries. So,
Mm-hmm.
but if he's healthy next year, I definitely think that Martindale loves to blitz a lot. He didn't blitz as much as he would have liked to, but if he's got him healthy and Thibodeaux, I think you'll see more blitzing more. But I definitely think they definitely need more help on the defense because the offense was actually ranked better than the defense. So again, the defense won some games, but they definitely need some help. Especially again, losing Bradbury hurt. Adoree Jackson was hurt. Injuries hurt. But again, it's part of the game. You know what? The 49ers, they had 3 different quarterbacks and they lost another one in the playoffs. I mean, they still were like what it was like 13-4 something like that. They had all these injuries to the quarterback, but they didn't use it as an excuse. So it hurts, but you still got to play with the players that you have.
Yeah, it's ironic. Their third string quarterback was better than their starter.
We talk about this a lot, Victor. Is depth when we're talking about building a team? It's not always just about the stars; it's about the depth. So on offense and defense, particularly, is there any guy who got some playing time this year, but maybe not like a full snap count, or maybe just half, that excites you going into next year, where you're like, I want to see more of this guy? Because one of the guys I know injury got to him for me is I want to see what comes of Azeez Ojulari and Kayvon Thibodeaux together on the field. When we were watching the playoff game. I told Joe, I was like, if they're not on the field, this game's over, because there was really nothing the Giants defense was really doing at that point in time in the game. So for you, who is it? Who excites you? Who are you ready to see as a fan next year hit the field?
Those, like I said, I was a big Ojulari fan the first year, so I really would have loved to see him in Thibodeaux, because I think they could have really have an imposing attack. And again, I think McKinney was hurt. I mean, we've had these injuries in the defense, so I like to see more McKinney. I like to see Adoree Jackson, healthy. I think he can help. But I think we need, like you said, we need depth. We're very thin at corner. We definitely need to do some drafting, because it can make a difference. Like the Jets drafted Sauce Gardner, and the Jets were among the top defense league. They were toward the bottom last year, but they drafted Johnson as well in the first round. So if you could draft a couple more, it could swing that defense. So I'm also looking forward to the draft and these guys staying healthy. And I really think we need another linebacker. They did something that was interesting. The best linebacker was a guy named Blake Martinez. They cut him at the beginning of the year. So I definitely think we need some more. Definitely need another linebacker. Definitely need some help on that. We definitely we just need to get more depth on the defense, especially in the core. And again, because that passing defense is something that concerns me.
So one of the things that we point out a lot, and I know Bob's obsessed with this, is when teams make a radical change from the first half to the second half. And even in that playoff game against Minnesota, your defense just stood up that second half. That fourth quarter, where it looked like Jeff didn't even get on the field because your defense took him out of it, I think is one of the best halves of defense played in football.
Yeah.
I understand, like, in quarters of a season, like, people get hurt or worn down. But what about the Giants at halftime makes this defense just a different unit than the first half? Because their first half splits are really, really bad. But their second half splits are above average. And it doesn't normally make sense why that would happen.
And that's been a big difference from the previous years, because the Giants the previous 2 or 3 years, they lost some very winnable games in the fourth quarter. They had the opposite problem. They were playing better in the first half, and in the second half, they didn't make the adjustments. So I think it's probably a combination of what Daboll was saying to them and probably Wink Martin, probably the two of them working together, because especially in the first half of the year when they were 6-1, they just made some adjustments. They were most of those 6 wins, they were trailing at halftime, and they made the adjustments, like you said. And the defense just came on strong. And again, part of it is just playing as a unit together. I think that's something they were able to do. Sometimes not always having the most talented people, but if you get them to play together, it makes it different. Because sometimes you have a great player, but he's a cancer on the team, and you trade him for 2 guys who aren't as talented as he is, but they're team players. They know their roles, and they play better with those two guys there instead of the star guy who's negative, who's a complainer. It just really just brings everyone down. So I think if you get them to buy into the team concept, I think that's what they did. Also, they said the atmosphere was much different this year. I think when they had Joe Judge, who was the coach the previous 2 years, it was like people didn't feel relaxed. They was always on edge, and he didn't make them feel appreciated. They said when Daboll came in, he said, you can always come to me and talk to me. He made every player feel welcome. He says, you have any issue, we could talk. I'm always there for you. I'm always approachable. And the players really appreciated that. So I think that's something, so even when they were struggling in the first, I think, when he talks to them, I think he said, guys, I wasn't in the locker room at halftime, but I think he's saying, hey, guys, we can come back, and him and Wink Martindale, I think the two of them working together say, yeah, the game is not over. I think he got them to believe in themselves, and they didn't give up. I think, especially when you're losing, after a while, you start losing games. You just don't show up because the body language will show you just giving up. Mm-hmm. These guys, I think, were able to make sure these guys did not give up, which is why I think they were able to come out in the second half. Whereas in the previous 2 years, they would just fall apart in the second half.
Yeah, one of the things I've held true for the Giants for a little while here has been just the even though they've won a Super Bowl in more recently than a lot of other teams, is this culture of just it's a negative culture. There's a culture of losing, and a lot of the veterans that have been on this team for a while, it often feels like they gave up in years past. And with the coaching change, we don't necessarily see them giving up. And I think that when we think towards the future of the Giants, that's really, really really amazing to see out of them. But one of the things, like, I kind of want to ask you about, just when we watch football games, it's similar to like a home run in baseball, but an interception, right? When your defense gets a turnover, you as a fan are just like, yes, this is amazing. And when your quarterback or another player on your offense, you're just devastated. Now, what we saw in the stats this year was that Daniel Jones kept the turnovers to a minimum, but he also kept the production to a minimum as a quarterback. Mm-hmm. And do you feel that when the Giants do start opening up the passing attack with more wide receivers, do you think this defense will be up to the task in terms of getting takeaways in case Daniel Jones makes mistakes? Because this year he was basically the number 2 quarterback at not making any mistakes, but that's because he didn't take a lot of chances. Once he starts taking chances, do you think this defense will be able to show up in the ways that they need? Because as we said, they're kind of a middle of the road in the first half, but they kind of balance it out in the second half. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it's a great point you bring up, especially you brought up takeaways. When the Giants won their second Super Bowl in 1990-91, they were not the most talented team. They beat a Bills team that was better than they were, but they did two things in that game. Number one, the Bills only had the ball for 20 minutes. Giants had 40 minutes to do. Ball control is important, but also not turning the ball over. The team that wins the takeaways usually wins the game most of the time. And that team, I think, only had like 14 or 15 turnovers the whole season. They were very good at keeping control of the ball. So the way this defense is right now, I don't think they're good enough if they start turning the ball over on the offense to make up the deficit in all those games. But if they can get a couple guys in the draft, they get a good corner, another good rusher, someone who could stop the run. Yes, and they can. I definitely think they're going to try to get at least a couple guys on defense. They definitely do that. I definitely think they're going to try to open up more with Jones. They were trying that the last few games. Again, because he's shown in the past that he could definitely throw some, but the mistakes. So that was the big problem. He fumbled the ball way too much. So I think that's why they were very conservative. But I think if they get a good receiver in the draft, or I don't know if they want to go through free agency after what happened with Galladay. But you just never know. But again, free agency is, people always talk about getting a free agent. You see it in basketball, basically you sign a free agent, makes a big deal. But it just seems like in football, when you sign a lot of high-priced free agents, some of them always seem to come back to disappoint you. So I think teams know that. I think that's why generally they like to build through the draft. They might sign one big free agent, but when because I know the Giants, when like a number of years ago they signed like 3 or 4 big agents at once, and they made the playoffs that one year. But the next year those guys all like they got injured, they didn't produce. So it tends to come back to haunt you. So yeah, I think if they can definitely get a good wide receiver in the draft that they can build up, if Robinson comes back healthy, I think they will take more chance. Also, you got to make sure you got a good offensive line. So they got to get another lineman, and you got to protect Jones. I mean, yeah, he's good at running, but still at the same time, you want to protect it. You don't want him running for his life, which is what he was doing earlier in his career. So I think they could do that. I think they will take more chances, and because again, if they get another pass rusher, Martindale loves to blitz. So I think you will see some of the more of that next year. I don't know how much more, but I think you'll see. But one thing I like about Daboll, which no one's ever mentioned, and this is just my personal opinion, I like the fact that he's a guy who's an offensive coordinator. But when he came over, he didn't do all the play calling. He gave it to the offensive coordinator. A lot of offensive coordinators, they love to call the plays. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of those guys that when they come in and they coach and they call the plays, their offenses are not as good as when they were an offensive coordinator. So I actually like the fact he was humble enough to give the play calling to the offensive coordinator. Because it's always been a concern of mine, because there have been some offensive coordinators, for some reason, they become a head coach, their offenses are boring. I don't know why. So I like the fact that he was
McDaniel.
Yeah.
Well, Jets, Victor, question for you. Sorry to interrupt, but you mentioned basketball.
Yeah.
And are you Nets or Knicks?
And I'm a Knicks fan, but I also like the Nets. But I'm a Knicks fan.
So when we're talking about big free agent splashes, the Knicks have not, but the Nets have gone really heavy into that into the free agency. They went out, they got Kevin Durant, they got Kyrie Irving, and that hasn't worked. They traded them all away. Now they've got this amalgamation of players. And when I think about the Giants, you're right. It doesn't feel like a big free agent splash is necessary for the Giants to succeed. And Joe doesn't watch basketball.
No.
And the point that you made was really important, is that big free agents in basketball tend to make more of a difference, because just the way the game is played is a lot different. A guy that can dominate and put 20 and 15 on the board, you don't really have that in football. There's no
the opposite in football
connection.
ESPN, it's the only thing that's more damning than the Madden curse is the winner of the offseason curse. Every single year until the Jets didn't get a 5th pick overall, the top 5 pick this year, that for the last 10 years, ESPN has declared the winner of the offseason has had a top 5 pick the following year. And I particularly know this because Cleveland has gotten it like 4 times. Winner of the offseason and keeps losing. I love it. So, but the point of the NFL, it doesn't, you can't turn it around for free agency, because most of the time you end up putting yourself with cap time bombs. This contract's going to blow up and destroy us. To me, it's a real fear of Jacksonville's long-term progress, because Jacksonville did some really big free agencies. Yeah, they won the division and all that, but 2 years from now, Christian Kirk's contract's going to look really ugly, just like Galladay's does now. So there's one last question I got for you here, in just terms of the general coaching scheme and policies that you guys have there. When we look at the Giants and their Super Bowl winning coaches, Parcells and Coughlin, they both had this impression of no nonsense, physical, going to hurt the quarterback type defenses and control the ball on offense. Is, from what you've seen, Daboll in that mode from the way that he deals with his defense?
Yeah, well, I think with Daboll and Martindale, I think they're going to look to improve the defense, because I think they know Giants history. The Giants have won with with that great defense, and I think they're going to look to improve that defense. And I know they know that. That's what I think I like about Daboll. Even though he comes from an offensive background, I think he realizes the importance of defense. I think some offensive coordinators, they just focus only on this offense. They just ignore it. What I've noticed about defensive coordinators that become coaches, they tend to focus more on the overall game. But sometimes the offensive coordinators don't, and Daboll does. That's one thing I like about him. He's very flexible. He's very open-minded. But at the same time, he won't put up with with crap from people. So he's flexible, but at the same time, he won't put up with crap. So I think that's why he'll do well with the Giants. And Parcells is good. Parcells, when they won the second Super Bowl, he cut Lionel Manuel because he was running late to meetings, and he was their best receiver. He was the only pretty good receiver that they had, but he cut him because he wanted to show them, I'm not going to put up with this, and they won the Super Bowl. So I think, you got to have a little bit of both. You got to show them, we're not going to put up with any of these games with you, but at the same time, I'm Judge and not doing a good job at it. He also needs to show them that you're on their side, and then if you do a good job, I'm going to praise you. I'm going to be there for you. So you got to do that and make the players feel welcome. So it's like with a regular job. If people don't feel praised and appreciated, they're not going to be loyal to you. They're not going to go all the way for you. But if you show them that you're on their side, they'll do everything for you. And that's what the players have said about this regime. They say that the atmosphere is totally different. But yeah, I definitely think they're going to work on the defense because, like you said, in a close game, if you're in the playoffs, and like I said, they won some games there because the defense came up big in the second half. You want to do that even more so that if the offense makes a mistake, if they accidentally fumble the ball, your defense will stop them. 4th and 1, 4th and goal at the 1 yard line. You want to know they can come up with a big play.
So the big question here, Victor, when's the next Giants Super Bowl victory?
Won't be next year. If all goes well, let's just say the third season. So not this year, not the next year, but the season after that. If all goes well, I say the third year. I think is a good bet, as long as they keep doing everything right.
I like it. That's really
still
positive.
On that team?
If he doesn't want $16 million a year, I say yes. My feeling is yes. I think he likes being on the Giants. And I think he realized, even though he had a good year, his previous 3 years. Remember, his second year, he also got hurt. He had a high ankle sprain. I think he rushed back too quickly, so he didn't do as well in the second half of his second year as he did in the first half of his second year. So I think he realizes that. I think if they offer him $14 million, he'll go for it. So I would say he's with the Giants 2 years from now, unless anything can happen. But I would say he's with the Giants.
Perfect. Victor, I want to give you a chance to full screen anything that you wanted to discuss here. The floor is yours, my man.
Well, listen, I'm just a Giants fan. I'm happy. I think they're doing great stuff, and I think I'm really excited about the future. And I would just say, for those who are football fans, don't give up on your team because things can change. It's been a rough 5 years for us, but things are starting to look better. And I do a lot of other things, but I just want to focus on football right now because right now is I just think football's the kind of game you watch it for 3 hours, you enjoy it, makes you feel good, and when you go through the tough times, it's like with anything. Like I'm an entrepreneur, I have my ups and downs, but when I go through the downs and then things go well, I feel good. I appreciate it more. So I appreciate this team so much more because of what I've gone through. Also, we've won in the past, so that makes it easier. Mm-hmm. But if your team is struggling right now, don't give up on them. Sometimes people, become bandwagon jumpers and they jump on the team and wins the Super Bowl. Don't do that. Stick with your team because, maybe 2 or 3 years from now, things will get better. They start winning. And, you've been, fan 4, 5, 6 years and you've been struggling and they start winning. And it feels so much better. And I can tell you, like, when the Giants struggled, they won those Super Bowls, it felt good. So hopefully in 3 years from now, I'll have that same feeling of joy. So I can be honest, I felt really good this year after the last several years of going through some struggles. So with everything, like, I'm an entrepreneur. Like I said, I have my good signs and my bad signs. But man, when things start going well, it feels good. I don't give up. That's the thing. Whatever you're going to do, don't give up. In anything, as long as you persevere, you will succeed. One of the reasons why people are not successful in any venture, whether it's sports, business, entrepreneurship, whatever, a big reason is because they give up right before they're about to be successful. So don't give up, be persistent, and don't give up on your team. Be loyal to your team, and most of the time, you'll be happy for it. They're going to make you feel good, and you're going to say, you know what? I went through the bad sides, and now I'm enjoying the good sides. Because when you get that Super Bowl after struggling all those years, it's really sweet.
Perfect. And the New York Giants, one of 8 teams to make the divisional round of the playoffs this year. No one saw that at the start of the season. Most people would have had them in the category of the first 8 picks of the draft, not the last 8. So thank you very much for being here, Victor. That's a great message. Stick with what you're doing because it will work eventually. And even the San Diego Chargers might win one. You might not blow it on yourselves.
Absolutely. Hey, Joe and Bob, thank you for having me on the show. It was a real pleasure being on. I had a lot of fun. It was great talking football with you both.
Perfect.
You're
Well, thank you
welcome.
very
Thank you.
much for
You
being
too,
here.
Victor.
We'll be with all you team players next time. Please continue clicking like and subscribe.
Bye-bye.
See you later.